Oh, that business meeting was upon us again. I didn't realize it was the third Wednesday. This month is just really clipping on by. Yesterday I went to see May Osborne up at the nursing home, and I was telling her the ladies were going to come up Saturday and see her. And boy, you thought it was Christmas. Boy, she just got all excited. And she said, well, I'll just have to get ready. And I said, well, what is it you got to get ready? I said, you look all right. She said, oh, no, I got to get some chairs and stuff. She said, how many's coming? I said, well, I don't know how many's coming. But she said, well, I'll be ready. She said, I'll have my chairs and stuff. And she had to show me all the sweaters. About all she does, I guess, is crochet. I guess that's all she's got to do. But, boy, she's got a lot of pretty sweaters crocheted. And she's 90 and a half years old. And she's in better health now than she's been in years. I mean, her hearing's good, or just, you know, she just gets up and gets around, and she just really hard to believe that she's that old. They're taking good care of her, I guess. She's eating good, and they're taking good care of her. And she likes it up there, I guess, as well as you can like it anywhere like that. But she was really excited when I said, well, the ladies of the church are going to come up and see you Sunday. Well, it's good to see this good crowd here tonight. You know, I was thinking of something today as I was preparing this message, and there was a question came up. Why serve God? Why serve God? I mean, why not just... Because some people think this way, you know. Because I've talked to people and they say, you know, you try to really get them to serve God, and they say, well, I don't want any rewards anyway. I mean, it's just like, you know, I'm going to get in, and that's all I really want. You know, why serve God? Is there any advantage to serving God? I mean, why not just get saved and say, the heck with it. I'll just do what I want to do, and then when I die, I'll go to heaven. Why serve God? The Bible teaches that there's two types of Christians. There are spiritual Christians, and then there are worldly Christians. And we're going to take a look at two Christians in the Bible. Well, they wouldn't call Christians there. Then at that time point, it was in the Old Testament, but they were saints. And it says that the Old Testament is written for our learning. There's a lot of good examples and a lot of illustrations in the Old Testament that we can learn from. And we see a picture here of a worldly Christian, or a worldly saint. Let me rephrase that in case they're taping it. Are you taping this? Oh boy. A worldly saint. And he's saved. And he's in heaven right now. But he was just as worldly as he could be. And we know that he's in heaven because it says in 2 Peter that he's in heaven. Some of you probably know who I'm talking about. Do you have any idea who I'm talking about? No. That's a good guess. But he's another one. He was a worldly saint. But he was one of the heroes of faith. Huh? Do what? Oh, well, you can forget it. I'll tell you who it is. This could go on all night. We got a business meeting tonight. I know Ken. There's no stopping point. Turn, if you will, to Genesis, the 11th chapter, the 31st verse. And we see a saint here that's just about as worldly as you can get. The 11th chapter of Genesis, verse 31. We know that God had called Abraham, told him to get up and get out. And we find here in verse 31 that Abram at that time, his name was later changed to Abraham, but he took his father, Terah, with him. And he also took a nephew and his name was Lot. And they traveled with them until his father had died. And God had blessed those men. I mean, really blessed them. Their flocks, their herds really grew. And if we look at, now, if you will, look in chapter 13. And look at verse 5. And it picks up here talking about Lot and Abraham. It says, and Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. And the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. I mean, God had really blessed them. And there was a strife between the herdsmen of Abram's cattle and the herdsmen of Lot's cattle. and the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land. And Abram said unto Lot, Let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. In other words, Abraham said, you just choose where you want to go. If you want to go that way, or if you want to go that way, whichever way you don't want to go, I'll take what's left. But look at Lot. He was very materialistic. Now stop and think about this. Abraham was his uncle. Abraham had really been good to him. But he wasn't thinking of Abraham. Look what it says he did. And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere. Before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest into Zoar. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot sojourned east, and they separated themselves the one from the other. He was thinking about number one. He thought, whoa, man, there's them old rocky mountains, that old barren desert to the right. And there's that beautiful pasture land with the waters to the left. You know, he could have said, Abraham, I've really been blessed since I've been with you, and you are my uncle, and you're older than I am, and I know just those mountains and dealing with all of that would be hard on you. Why don't you go this direction? And I'll take the desert and the mountains. But no, he said, I want the plains, and I want the water. And there's a real good lesson here. Look what it says. Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. He didn't just jump right into Sodom, but when he set his tent up, the door was facing Sodom, because that appealed to him. That worldliness, the things that was going on in Sodom, the bright lights, appealed to him. But he wasn't just immediately, he didn't just say, okay, I'm leaving here and went to Sodom. No, he was looking that way. And folks, when you start looking at the world, it won't be long, you'll be right in the middle of the world. He had his eye on the things of Sodom and Gomorrah. And no doubt he would continue to move closer. Then a little closer and a little closer. And that's the way it is with backsliding. I've never seen a spiritual Christian that was coming to church and serving God one day, and just the next day they was out in the bars and the honky-tonks. It's always a series of compromises. Well, this ain't too bad. I think it'd be okay if I did this. That's the reason they call it backsliding. It's downhill. And he wound up right in the middle of Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. Well, why in the world would he want to be there then? Did you ever stop and think about that? If they were as wicked as they were, and the Bible tells how wicked they were, why would he even want to be living there? What would he have in common with that society, that type of people? But see, here's the difference. Lot was looking towards the world. Abraham was looking for a city that hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Look what was said. Now listen, Sodom and Gomorrah got so wicked and so bad, God said, man, I've had it. I can't stand any more of this. We're going to destroy it. But on the way, notice what happened, chapter 18. And the Lord appeared unto him, that's Abram, in the plains of Maram, and he sat in the tent door of the heat of the day. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door, and bowed himself toward the ground, and said, My Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will fetch a morsel of bread, and comfort ye your hearts. After that ye shall pass on. For therefore are ye come to your servant. And they said, So do as thou hast said. So, see, that was the Lord and two angels. Now, he didn't realize it at the time. They would just address anyone like that, Lord, as Lord. But he fed them. And after he fed them, they started on their way. Well, after they fed them, then he told them, Abraham, you're going to have a son. That was when he promised that he would have a son. And then they started on their way. But look at this. After the Lord had departed a little way, he said, and the Lord said, Shall I hide this from Abraham, that thing which I do? He said, I can't hide this from Abraham. He said, I got to go back and tell him what I'm going to do. Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. Boy, now look at this next. Now this is verse 19. Look at this. For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken of him. Isn't that good? Isn't that good that the Lord would say that? Boy, I know Abraham. He'll raise his children right. He'll keep my laws, my statutes, and he'll bring his children up in the ways of the Lord. He never said that about Lot. He said, I'm not going to hide this from Abraham. He's my friend. And he's going to become a great nation. And I know that he'll raise his children right. And I'm going to tell him what I'm going to do. So he went down there and he said, well, we're going to go down and see if Sodom and Gomorrah is really as wicked as it's reported to be. We're going to destroy it. Well, you remember what happened. Then Abraham said, well, Lord, if there's 50 righteous people, would you destroy the righteous with the wicked? He said, it wouldn't be right to destroy the righteous with the wicked. And you remember, I guess he was the first Jew because he kept Jewing him down. Well, he's the father of the Jews, isn't he? And he finally got down. Finally, the Lord said, no, if there's even 10 righteous people, I won't destroy the city for the 10's sake. But guess what? There wasn't even 10. There wasn't even 10. Now look how far Lot had backslid. Look at chapter 19. And there came 2 angels to Sodom at evening. And Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. Now, do you know what history reports? That I can't hardly fathom this. But Lot was the mayor of Sodom. Can you imagine anyone backsliding to that extent? He was the mayor of that wicked city. What does it mean he sat in the gate? Does anybody have any idea what that means when it said he sat in the gate of the city? Why would he sit in the gate of the city? I've shared this before. That's where the rulers always met. That's where city council met. That's where all city business took place, was at the gate of the city, and all of the elders and the councilmen and whatever, they came there, and they had a little room built in the gate. Now, what I mean by that is big, massive walls. The cities were fortified with massive walls, and they'd have rooms there in there, and that's kind of like City Hall. And that's where they conducted all their business. And it says that he sat there in the gate. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them. And he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, Behold now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and ye shall rise up early, and go your ways. And they said, Nay, but we will abide in the street all night. And he pressed upon them greatly, and they turned in unto him, and entered to his house. And he made them a feast, and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. And they called unto Lot and said unto him, Where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. And folks, that didn't mean that we want to shake hands. That's not what that meant. That meant the men of the city wanted to have sexual relations with these 2 angels. And Lot went out at the door unto them, and shut the door after him, and said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. Behold, now I have 2 daughters, which have not known man. Let me pray, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and do as ye to them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. Can you imagine anybody so backslidden that he's willing to give his 2 daughters to them? What a mess he was in. Well, they were going to break the door down, and the angel struck them with blindness. The men were so wicked, after they were blind, they were still trying to find the doorknob. Boy, isn't that something? And the men said unto Lot, verse 12, Hast thou here any besides son-in-law and thy sons and thy daughters, and whatsoever thou hast in the city, bring them out of this place. For we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxing great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. Now notice this. And Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his son-in-laws. You know what that means? You mean try to tell me God talks to you? Well, you hypocrite. You're as bad as we are, and you're trying to tell us God warned you and said he's going to destroy it. He had completely lost his testimony. He had completely lost his witness. Now notice this. Let's see if I can find it real quick. And when the morning rose, then the angels hastened Lot, saying, Arise, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters, which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his 2 daughters, and the Lord being merciful unto him, and they brought him forth and set him without the city. Had to drag him out of the city. Grabbed a hold of him and drug him out of the city. Now, why do you suppose they did that? Does anybody have a clue? Why would the angels drag Lot and his wife and 2 daughters that remained at home? Why would they drag them out of the city? Well, that's true, but I mean, why didn't they just say, stay here then?
They could not destroy Sodom until they left.
But why not? Because the righteous shall not perish with the wicked.
The story of the rapture.
Yeah. The righteous, look what it says in 2 Peter. In the 2nd chapter of 2 Peter, verse 6 says, And turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemning them with an overthrow, making them an example unto those that after should live ungodly, and delivered just Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked, for that righteous man dwelleth among them in seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. Now what is that? Folks, that's positional righteousness. He sure had no practical righteousness. He was not living a godly life. He was not living the type of a life that spoke or gave him a testimony. He had no testimony. He was completely backslidden. But God saw him as righteous because of the blood. And the angel says, we can do nothing till you're out of this city, because the righteous shall not perish with the wicked. And they grabbed hold of him and drug him out of the city. And he told them, he said, now don't look back. Well, guess what? His wife looked back and turned into a pillar of salt. It even gets worse. See, listen, Lot did not raise his children right. Probably never made mention of God in the home. As soon as they'd escaped, his 2 daughters got him drunk, and they both had children by him. And guess what happened? They became the Moabite and Ammonite nations who plagued Israel from the very get-go, constantly warring and causing trouble with Israel. Why? Now notice something. Now the Bible says he was a righteous man. He was a just man. He's in heaven. But look at the curse that was brought on his family, that was brought on God's people, just because this man would not live for God. He would rather have the things of the world. Was he saved? He was saved. But he lived in a very wicked, backslidden condition. He lost. Now keep this in mind. If you remember back at the beginning, it says that Abraham and Lot had great substance. When he left there, folks, all he had was the shirt on his back. He'd lost his daughters. He'd lost his wife. Still had 2 daughters, but he lost all of his other daughters, his son-in-laws, everything he possessed. He'd lost his wife. He lost it all. He got out by the skin of his teeth. Does it pay to live for God? Folks, there's more to living for God than just going to heaven. Do you care for your kids? See, you say, well, I'm saved. My kids aren't saved. That's their problem. Well, that's one way you can look at it, I guess. But don't you care for your kids? Now, stop and think about this. First of all, he should have never been in Sodom. But if he had been in Sodom and been the right kind of man, he might have made a difference there in Sodom. He could have been a witness. At least he could have got his own kids saved. It's pitiful, isn't it? Boy, I'll tell you what, I really admire young parents that are bringing their children and teaching their children and try to have a godly home and bring their children up to know the Lord. You don't have to do it, but you'll be sorry if you don't. You'll wind up losing your children to the world. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of Christian people that have absolutely lost their children to the world. Their kids are in prison, they're an adult, they're everything in the world because we as Christians won't live godly. We say, well, I'm saved and that's all that matters. But look at the difference there. God said about Abraham, I know him, and I know he will raise his kids right. He never said any such thing about Lot. He had to drag him out of the city. I'm always saying I'll be glad to meet the people when I get to heaven, the old saints. I don't know how glad I'm going to be to see Lot. Not because I'm better, because it's just almost like that's going to be depressing. Where's your kids, Lot? Well, I got mixed up in the world. I lost my family. Isn't that terrible? That's terrible. And the nations that he did, Father, were nothing and are today just heathens. Lost. A whole nation of lost people. How many remember the story of Ruth and Boaz? You remember Elimelech? And there's a famine in Israel, and they went down to the land of Moab, and their 3 sons married these Moabite women. Well, Ruth was a Moabite. And she came back and married Boaz. And Christ is in that lineage. See, it's still by grace. It's still by grace. And there'll be some out of every nation that are saved. But what a curse he brought on the world. You know, the Bible says that our rewards follow us. Our rewards follow us. You see, you might serve the Lord all your life, as Paul did, or not all of his life, but I mean all the time he served the Lord, then he was beheaded. Well, that don't end it, and then he goes to his reward, because you see, the work you start and the influence you have just goes on and on and on. And I'll tell you, Lot's rotten influence is still going on today. The writings of Paul are still bearing fruit today. The faithfulness of Abraham is still bearing fruit today. And your life will continue to bear fruit, whether it's good fruit or whether it's bad fruit. One time there was a man, he used to go to church in Sapulpa, and he was well up in years when he got saved. And he had some kids that really had some problems. And he got saved, and he was talking to some of the fellows about it. He said, I just don't understand. He said, why am I having so much trouble out of my teenage sons? He said, I got saved, and I'm really trying to serve the Lord. And he said, they're just rotten. They won't listen to me, so forth and so on. And the preacher said, you're still going to reap what you sow. See? Lot was saved. He was drug out of the city, but he had to continue to reap what he sowed. And like I said, I'm always glad, and I've always been glad when I see young families that bring their children, that are faithful to the house of the Lord, and they bring them to church and to Sunday school. Because listen, you don't have to do it. But I'll tell you what, you're going to reap a lot of heartaches down the road if you don't. You'll reap a lot of heartaches later down. Because the day comes in where they won't listen to you. It's just like Lot's son-in-law. What are you talking about? You trying to tell me? You don't live for God and you're trying to tell me God talks to you? Trying to tell me there's angels in your house? Sure. Well, you know, that's a tragic commentary on Lot's life. But the good news is we can study these things and not make the same mistakes, right? See, that's the whole point in putting these stories in here, these accounts in here, so that we can look back and say, here's where they went wrong, or here's where this one was right, and pattern our lives accordingly. I'm thankful for Abraham. I'm sorry for Lot. I just wonder if all his descendants will rise up at judgment. All those that are lost, and point to him. Say, why didn't you live for God? Why did you take us down the wrong trail? And I'm sure his own daughters and son-in-laws felt that way immediately when the fire and brimstone started falling. And you know, they've excavated that city of Sodom. And they said that judgment fell so fast in the tar pits. They found people there in the marketplace, just the skeleton remains that's buried in the tar. And it says that the people in the marketplace still had the coins in their hand where they were getting ready to purchase. But destruction fell so suddenly. The sulfur vapors and the fire and the smoke, they died so instantly. They died with the coins in their hands. Folks, listen, when God's judgment falls, it comes swiftly. And we just got one chance to do it right. We better do it right. Would you dismiss us, Wayne?